11th hour, at the 11th hour with less than 2 months to go for a new term. Now, whether the decision is Matt or someone else, in fairness, should this really be your decision to make? And we recall Mitch McConnell not allowing hearings for a new justice, Supreme Court justice in Obama's lame duck term. Obviously, a health officer and Supreme Court justice are two different things, but the principle behind it's really the same. And the principle is let the people decide. And in our case here, the people have decided. They voted in 4 new commissioners. By not allowing the newly elected commissioners to make this important decision, you're disenfranchising and ignoring the will of the people. Now, I know it's true that new board members are not likely to be versed in this topic. They probably have not been following the debate, but it's also certainly true that they could be brought up to speed in a relatively short period of time and could be ready for a vote by February. And I've heard your concerns about not making this appointment in a timely fashion because of the worry of the state coming in. Nobody wants that. That is for sure. Nobody wants that. But, you know, how likely is that is if the state sees that this is an ongoing effort? So I'm not going to belabor this. I'm just going to say again, 2 months, 2 months to go. The new board really should be making this appointment. You've all served the community well. Please don't go out on a sour note. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alyssa Davis, City of Brighton, followed by Janine Ayer.
Good evening, commissioners. I dressed up for you tonight. So part of my attire, actually, I am a controller for a commercial construction company and sitting behind a desk most of the time. But with that industry, as with other industries, comes differences. And sometimes it looks like this. So when you are considering an environmental health director to sit in a medical position, that would be like me coming in to do that position and looking like this. So the bottom line is Matt Bowling really genuinely doesn't have the backdrop for this position. About 4 meetings ago, I believe it was Commissioner Gross that had stated really the background doesn't matter. He's had his hands in this pot. I can go have my hands in any pot as well. It will not change the fact that down deep inside of me is the construction industry. This is my forte. Environmental engineering is Mr. Bowling's forte, not vaccines and medical information. And to just take this blasé attitude like, well, he's already done some of this before is not fair. It's not fair to any constituent here in Livingston County, not one of them. And that's why you're here. See, I got somehow suckered into being a delegate, right? And now I'm looking at all of this like there's people that voted for me. All these people are relying on me to be their voice. We've screamed from the rooftops. We've given you all kinds of information. And this really is not a political decision. This really is a decision for the best interest of all of the constituents here in Livingston. And we're putting a lot of trust in you. So I hope and pray that you will really consider the other candidates who I think have brought to the table really good backgrounds, and they will dress the role and they will serve it appropriately. So thank you for hearing me and thank you for looking at me. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Janine Ayer, Genoa Township, followed by Colleen Quinn.
Good evening, commissioners, and thank you all each for your service to our community. And thank you for making the interviews of the health officer candidates open to the public. I attended all 4 interviews conducted on October 31st, 4 hours. I would like to share what I learned and what I didn't learn from the candidates and from the candidates' answers to your questions. There's been differing opinions on what educational background and experience best equips an individual for the position of health officer. What I learned in the process of the interviews is that an educational background in health policy, not health administration, is a superior background. Do we agree that the most far-reaching and consequential responsibility of a health officer is the decision to declare a health emergency and to take appropriate steps in mitigating by emergency orders? I realized in the course of the interviews that education and health policy is superior than health administration in making these significant decisions. And administrative education does not provide the technical background to competently assess health emergencies. The 3rd and 4th candidates of the interviews had a balanced view of large agency recommendations when it came to adopting recommended emergency orders. Not so with the first 2 candidates, from what I heard. In fact, in particular, Mr. Bowling never really answered the tough questions with a straight answer when it came to the criteria on issuing emergency orders. He always stated that it depends on this, and that, I mean, he just says it depends and never stated what factors it actually depends on. And maybe because of his education, he may not know. And he also referred to, quote, the lens of the community, which he failed to define when asked. The county health officer should personally have the expertise to competently make those calls and should be able to explain that criteria. So I would urge you to think about those factors in your vote this evening. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
That's all the cards I have. Oh, excuse me, Colleen Quinn, Genoa Township. I am sorry.
Good evening. I want to thank the board for allowing us to witness the interview process. I thought you asked some great questions to the candidates, and I especially like the questions related to individual and constitutional rights and their ability to question and push back against unsubstantiated medical guidance. This skill set is important based on a recent pandemic experience. Last month, the CDC panel voted to include the COVID vaccine into the recommended childhood immunization schedule. It now goes before the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, where it will likely pass. It is disgraceful that despite serious and rising complications from the vaccine, the CDC is recommending this, and it's still under emergency use authorization. Unfortunately, much of the medical community has chosen to align with the political left and their agenda. Vanderbilt Medical Center and many other hospitals across the country are welcoming children seeking sex reassignment surgery. It is extremely lucrative, an extremely lucrative surgery, and child's lives are being sacrificed at the altars of grief. I would add, this creates patients for life when you do this surgery. The AMA has also succumbed to the left's wokeism. There is no doubt about the medical community's alliance. Recently, even the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists began advocating for a yes vote on Proposal 3. I was stunned to learn this, but unfortunately, all of our institutions, including governmental agencies, schools, banks, the entire corporate world have been politicized. Why am I telling you this? The Livingston County Health Department shares their medical director with the Washtenaw Health County Department. Washtenaw hired the medical director. Does Washtenaw County share our values or worldviews? Clearly they do not. And it would likely follow neither does the medical director. Since Mr. Bolang lacks a medical background, he would likely consult with the director regarding medical decisions. These decisions could be very well in direct opposition with the wishes of Livingston County residents. It is extremely important because Mr. Boland would be responsible for policy. As a citizen of Livingston County, I do not want to be subjected to decisions that just mirror Washtenaw County. I can clearly see how that would play out.
You have
Working
15
the-
seconds.
Working the receiving board in Ann Arbor on Tuesday, they were all masked up still. Just an example. You have some great candidates, especially 3 and 4, to choose from, and I pray, hope, and assume you will take all this information in consideration. Thank you.
No more in the room, so we'll go to Zoom and we'll start with the upper left-hand corner. Lori Cowan, if you would state your full name and your township, you'll have 3 minutes.
Sure. Lori Cowan from Unadilla Township. At last week's finance meeting, Commissioner Nakagiri expressed that he is now hesitant to support using ARPA funds for broadband, and I'm hoping the commission doesn't follow suit. We all know that this is a #1 need for a huge portion of our residents, and if collecting fees for the installed line is of the greatest concern, then I'd like to say one more time to please allot each township a portion of the money so they can invest it in the company that they think is best. And that frees you, the board, entirely. So that's it for tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up will be Lisa R. Lisa, if you give us your full name and township, you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, Lisa Rose Marnovich from Hamburg Township. And I just wanted to comment today and just a reminder that the Board of Commissioners did take an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States as well as the Constitution of Michigan. And in the Michigan Constitution, it talks about the political power and that all the political power is inherent in the people. Government is instituted for their benefit, security, and protection. And I firmly believe, as do many in the room, that we do have a representative government, and we expect you to represent the people of this county. And an overwhelming majority have voted in you as well as the incoming commissioners. And I agree with other of my fellow neighbors here that have talked about you considering waiting until the new members get sworn in. These are this health department leader is going to be working with this new board and not with the board that's leaving. And really hope that you will take into consideration the people who have put you in the place that you are in. And the next pandemic is likely to hit. I just heard from Attorney Todd Callender today on the radio that the US is flying in 300 people a day from Ghana, which is experiencing an Ebola outbreak. So the stage is already being set. Is Matt prepared for the next pandemic? And not only, by his experience, but also is he prepared to uphold people's freedoms that are given to us by the Constitution? Thank you.
Thank you. Next up will be Ben's iPhone. Ben, if you would provide your full name and city or township, you'll have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Ben Tasich. I live in Genoa Township. And first of all, I'd like to thank the board for their service. Without your service, this county could not operate. And I appreciate everything you do. And I'm sorry to see that you receive such poor treatment many times. I'm calling regarding the expansion of public transportation in our county. Our main public transport is Let's. They do a fantastic job, but we know that we need to expand Let's because there are many people in our county that depend on Let's for work, for doctor's appointments, for grocery shopping. And we have a county, I understand, over 200,000 in population. And we really need to improve public transportation. And I would hope that in the near future, that can be a discussion among the commissioners. Thank you for your time. I did not need the 3 minutes. And thank you again for all the work that you do for our county.
Thank you. Next up will be Jessica. If you give us your full name and city or township, you'll have 3 minutes.
Jessica, you need to unmute your phone, please. You should be able to.
Hello, this is Jessica Hamlin, Osceola Township. I am on tonight to also encourage the board to wait for the new commissioners to be sworn in for the position of the health director. It just seems right that we are coming to an end of many terms and we will have new faces in. Also, if that's not the direction that is going to be rightfully chosen, then I ask that you please think about what just happened last Tuesday. We now have 4 more years of Whitmer. We know what she is capable of. And unfortunately, when she's not going to be running again, we don't even know how far she can take this. And we, like it was said before, we're seeing masks uprising again. We know of community members wanting to encourage them in our schools again. We know that the pandemic in whatever source, whether it's an Ebola outbreak or COVID-19 or monkeypox, that this is going to be a continuation. And we need to make sure that it does not ever affect our youth like it did since 2020. And I can tell you that it is bad. And I see children who just struggle in so many areas, and we cannot allow that to happen again. So I ask that you think about that if you do choose to move forward tonight. And just remember, moving forward in the county, whatever that may look like for you, this will be on your resume. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. I have a card here from Gina. I can't read the last name. It starts with G, from Genoa Township. I was told that Gina doesn't know how to use the Zoom raise your hand. So I'm not sure who Gina is. I don't see her on. What? iPhone? In the middle? Okay. So,
Hear me?
yes. If you give us
Okay.
your full name and township, you'll have 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm from Genoa Township. My name is Gina Gagne. I've been a registered nurse for over 35 years. I have worked my entire career as a neonatal and pediatric nurse. I have also volunteered my time with Livingston County Health Department, helping children in our community in Flint with lead poisoning. I want the board to know this, that rejecting this mRNA gene therapy into babies and children is a life-altering thing. Yet Livingston County Health Department has been injecting children with this gene therapy drug since the FDA approved it for emergency use. And for the past several months, while Matt Bowling has been acting as an intern health officer, how do I know? As a volunteer RN, I have been receiving emails weekly to come to the department and jab the children, which I refuse to do. Why? Because there's data to support that children have a 99.99% survival rate even if they get COVID. Children have a higher percentage rate of complications and death when given the injection. Our current health officer, Matt Bowling, is currently going along with this injecting children with the so-called vaccine. I personally sent an email to Jennifer Kramer, who works at the health department in February, providing them with 1,000 peer-reviewed studies, all science-based. The data showed that these injections are not safe for children or young adults. Jennifer emailed back stating, I have shared your concerns with the studies of our medical team leaders. Matt Bowling was one of these team leaders, one of those who ignored the data and even now continues to inject children. The fact is that there are no studies on long-term effects. He has ignored factual data, putting our children at risk. He continues blindly following flawed guidance from the CDC and the Michigan Department of Health. And doesn't follow science research. We need someone in our health department who's capable of recognizing flawed guidance and willing to protect our children. Many of you board members have children and grandchildren that could later be affected by your decisions.
You have 15 seconds.
Please take time to read over the peer-reviewed studies that I have emailed to you all. When you try to push this off as a conspiracy theory, I want you to remember this. The Surgeon General of Florida recommended this vaccination to be removed from the immunization schedule, and the media silenced him. You have the power to hire a person of integrity.
Your time
Someone
is up. I'm
will
sorry.
not be pressured by government to do what is right for the safety of our community.
Next up will be Janine Spencer. Janine, if you state your full name and your city or township, you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Janine Deaton, and I am in Genoa Township. I just wanted to ask the board, I've been listening to everybody's statements here this evening, and I have to agree with Colleen. We get the advice from the Washtenaw County Medical Examiner. When my sister passed away, we didn't have anybody locally to do an autopsy. That body had to be shipped down to Washtenaw County because we don't have the facilities here to take care of all of our medical needs in the county. And when somebody is not experienced in this and has to go to Washtenaw County for advice, that doesn't seem fair to the people to Livingston County any further. If we don't have a qualified candidate for anybody that is interviewed, what is the rush on making a decision? Why not set it off until we can get qualified candidates that will fulfill the whole needs of our county instead of making a harsh, rash decision? I think that if you guys are not 100% satisfied with any of the participants or applicants right now, put it off for the new board, and let's wait a couple more months to see if we can open up the interviews again and get some more qualified people in. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else on Zoom, so I'm going to go ahead and close the first call to the public and remind citizens that there's a call to the public at the end of the meeting. Next on the agenda, item number 7 is approval of meeting minutes dated October 24th, 2022. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Support. Perfect.
Motion by Commissioner Plank, support by Commissioner Griffith. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The minutes are approved. Item number 8, tabled items from previous meetings. We have no tabled items. So we'll move on to item number 9, which is approval of tonight's agenda. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So move, Helserman.
Support, Reader.
Motion by Commissioner Helserman, support by Commissioner Reader. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The agenda is approved. Item number 10 are reports from commissioners. Are there any reports from commissioners this evening? Commissioner Gross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first thing I would like to do is point out that this past Friday was Veterans Day. And we received an email over the weekend that we have 56 county employees who are veterans from various disciplines, including one former Coast Guardsman. And so I would like to thank all the veterans, and if there's any, I know Commissioner Helserman is a veteran. If there's any other veterans in the room, if you would raise your hand or stand up. Commissioner-elect Deaton, thank you for your service, gentlemen. Oh, and Commissioner-elect Domas, thank you for your service, sir. As a follow-on to that, in addition to the 56 veterans that work in various disciplines throughout the county, obviously most of them are in law enforcement, but we have people in the drains, people in the courts, fiscal services, throughout the county's operations. So I thank all of them for their service. One additional thing that I would like to mention is that almost 3 weeks ago, I had the honor and privilege of attending the Veterans Treatment Court out at the Judicial Center, along with Commissioner Helserman, Commissioner Drick, and Commissioner Griffith. Other county officials were there, court officials were there. For those that don't know, under the auspices of Judge Shauna Murphy, the county has an activity that's called Veterans Treatment Court. And it was established a number of years ago to help veterans who, for whatever reason, have addictions. And those addictions have caused them to run afoul of the law. Not grievously, but nonetheless unlawful situations. And so they have the opportunity to enroll in the Veterans Treatment Court. And it's a multi-phased process. And they go through phases where they are mentored by the likes of Commissioner-elect Deaton and others, 17 others actually that are volunteers, and are given coaching and mentoring and assistance to help them straighten out their lives. And it has the added benefit of keeping them from going to prison. And so I thoroughly enjoyed that graduation ceremony. There was 2 veterans that have gone through the whole program, and it was a graduation ceremony that Judge Shauna Murphy did a wonderful job. And there was numerous other veterans who are in various phases of the program. And so for all that are involved in that, I congratulate you. That takes me to one other thing. Well, while we were there, one of the members of the court system read a veteran's creed, which is a wonderful thing that veterans can be proud of to recite when they get a chance. But in addition to that, there was another item on the program. And I would like to read that because I think it's very apropos, not only just to veterans, but to everybody, including this board and the community as a whole. So the title of this is called "The Man in the Arena." It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, and who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, and who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. I was really touched by this passage. And last week after the election, I had a little downtime on a couple of days, and I picked up a book that I've been trying to read for some time. It's a book written by Brett Baer, who's a Fox News channel anchor, if you will. And this particular book he's written deals with the World War II conference in Tehran, Iran, between Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, and Joseph Stalin, where they plotted how to defeat Hitler and plan for the Normandy invasion. And in reading this book, all of a sudden, I found this quote. And lo and behold, this was spoken by the President Theodore Teddy Roosevelt in 1910, when he spoke to a group of people at a conference in Paris, France, about the demands of citizenship. And so I think what I have read applies not strictly to veterans, but to all of us who are involved in public service or any other sector of our great country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Gross. Any, Commissioner Smith?
Just a quick note of thanks to our county clerk. Our elections went well. They were timely. We don't have 200,000 votes still to be counted out of 200,000 residents, so that's great. I do render a marvelous job. I would note that tonight we're also talking about approving a budget for next year, and in that budget there is no contingency outside of our general fund for what I assume is going to be a very large increase in cost for future elections. There's no allocation for it. The passage of Prop 2. There are townships and other municipalities looking at actually levying the taxes to pay for this. I pray we don't get to that point, but I just want everybody to be aware that we have a well-oiled machine in our clerk's office. She was named Clerk of the Year. And however, we need to be aware that in our funding and in our general fund, we may need to allocate some resources. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith. Anybody else? Commissioner Zajac.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this actually it follows apropos to Commissioner Gross's comments about doing the work and perhaps failing greatly on the attempt to do the work. You know, when I decided not to run again, I made a list of things to do. And it was driven largely from our strategic plan, the strategic plan that includes many one-year tasks. And as we get often reported to by our administrator, this board has done a good job at continuing to see those one-year tasks take effect. The number one goal, one-year task, however, in the healthy finances section was to allocate the ARPA funds. It was ahead of addressing the pension. It was ahead of coming up with strategic ways of new revenue. It was ahead of addressing certain additional benefit plans and other activities that were set for one-year tasks. And allocating the ARPA is something that we have yet to do. As the board knows, I proposed last week a resolution that was, I would say, 1 year in the making, from input from all of my colleagues, input from external sources, input from internal sources, and the subject of great debate in many work sessions and in public meetings aside from work sessions. And in order to accomplish this, we must in fact do something. In order to meet this task, this one-year task that is part of our strategic plan, we must do something. And there's been a couple of other commissioners who, since the drafting of that first proposal, have added additional input. Notably, last week we discussed a project for senior citizens, and there was an amendment that passed for that proposed resolution to the tune of $150,000 for senior citizens in this community. And over the weekend, also received feedback from Commissioner Drick, additional projects from external sources that I thought were very interesting and appropriate, considering many of the topics we've discussed. For instance, emergency shelter support in the Howell community, as well as Emergency Operation Expo that takes place in the community. Within my draft resolution, my colleagues know there was $810,000 that were left unallocated towards external resources or external project proposals. And after our meeting, I reflected on many of the discussion points and went back to look at the external proposals and tallied up the different types of proposals that existed. There was about $5 million in projects, internal projects, I should say, that were for hazard pay. And then other projects in the external bucket included $28 million worth of capital projects, $29 million worth of capital projects, which are things like $12 million to build a road, $5 million to build a parking structure, et cetera. But taking out those capital projects, we were left with about $3 million of projects that were associated with services, many like the senior citizens services, many like these emergency services projects. So as we look forward in the next 6 weeks before the end of the year, in the hopes of passing this one-year task goal that this board approved in the strategic plan, I will again be drafting a resolution that includes now the 3 additional recommended projects as a part of the external project group, and then further discusses some of the projects that have been proposed in the internal category. Just to highlight those, the Drain Commissioners project at the very beginning of this endeavor was, I believe, started as a $9 million request, and Drain Commissioner worked his way down to $7 million. And much of the discussion has put us somewhere between $6 million and $7 million for that project approval. And as my colleagues know, there was a long list of project details that were shared with the Drain Commissioner's infrastructure projects. The next grouping of projects that were in the resolution that went before FAM last week was the sheriff's service enhancement projects. And also, like the Drain Commissioner, Sheriff Murphy proposed a great amount of detail on different projects. One of those projects was actually the DAV program, which is one of the large projects this board approved earlier, I think last year, to start to do the take-home vehicle program. So the sheriff is actually proposing freeing up some ARPA funds to be used for internal activities through the Vision Tour contingency by proposing and using, as he's told me, this money for that project. Commissioner Drick also shared this thought with me in terms of using the $600,000 for another sheriff's department project, which gets us close to that 1.75 million. We just heard a great discussion and report about the great work of our clerk. One of the projects includes a microfilm conversion project, which the clerk provided great detail for us on what the scope of that project would be. Our fiscal services department has proposed using $5 million to pay for otherwise general fund activities, and then reallocating that money to be used to pay down the pension. Facility Services has proposed many projects, again, with great detail, dealing with HVAC in the East Complex, HVAC in the Judicial Center, in the Law Center, as well as a Judicial Center generator. The courts have proposed on-base, which I think many of my colleagues share a great interest in adding efficiencies where they're possible at the court. And this is a type of project that would allow for that to occur. We've talked in great detail about the EMS rural ambulance bases, $1.75 million being enough to do 1 or 2 or perhaps 3 rural ambulance bases in perhaps Putnam Township, Fowlerville, or Cohocton. And then lastly, second to last, we've talked in great detail through our budgets about the different needs of different departments throughout our county. And one of them that was particularly interesting because it wasn't as known to me as it is now is the animal shelter. And I received some photos today that I think are quite interesting, and I'll share them with my colleagues. But one of the examples of the needs of the animal shelter are the ongoings of surgery on an animal, excuse me, a surgery of an animal with 16 other animals in the surgery room because there's overcrowding that takes place at the animal shelter. Excuse me. Supplies stacked up in the garage next to other animals because there's overcrowding in the animal shelter. And lastly, the big project that we've talked about and we've heard much about is the broadband project. And our IT department, our administrator, many commissioners have worked very hard to gather information and work with community partners. And we are in the process of receiving many quotes from companies across the country interested in Livingston County and the work that Livingston County is doing in this space. So with the 6 weeks left, I encourage my colleagues to double down their efforts and work hard on this ARPA approval. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Zajac. Is there any other reports this evening? I have one short report, actually, just acknowledgement. I see in the audience, we have 3 of our commissioner-elects here in the room, and then our 4th one on Zoom. So I would give a shout out to Commissioner-elect Sample on Zoom, Commissioner-elect Deaton, who's here in the room, Commissioner-elect Fiani, and Commissioner-elect Domas. Thank you for being here and getting a head start on your, introduction to county government, although I know Commissioner Domas, former commissioner, he's well introduced. So, but thank you for being here. It's greatly appreciated. With that, I'll close reports and we'll move on to item number 11. It's a discussion on resolution. This is just a discussion item, resolution adopting the 2023 Livingston County operating budget. So we'll have our county administrator, Nathan Bird, lead the presentation. And our finance officer, Cindy Arbanis.
Thank you, Chairman Nakagiri and members of the board. As you just mentioned, Chairman, we're not asking for a vote on the budget tonight. This process is a little different than a typical resolution. It did go through FAM last week, but we have a public hearing that needs to be scheduled for November 28th, hopefully the same night that there would be discussion and a vote from the board. We also have requirements to post the budget for public inspection. So our hope tonight is that the board has a chance to talk about the budget, any outstanding issues or concerns. We will then take that feedback, formulate the resolution and the budget that would be posted for public inspection. And then when we come back on November 28th, that would be the night that hopefully the budget could be voted on. If there are issues or problems, it can be pushed into December, but we do have a legal obligation to get it adopted by the end of the year. So that's why whenever possible, we try to get it done in November when we can. So I'm not going to go through the whole budget, of course. I just want to hit a couple of the high points. Just to summarize, general fund budget totals about $56.8 million. The budget is balanced, as you've heard me say before, without shenanigans. Operational priorities that you've heard about during the level 2 departmental presentations are funded. We have a healthy amount of contingency funds available, and our general fund balance exceeds the target goal. Big picture, it's a good looking budget. And I will mention, as I said last week, that one of the notable changes from the level 3 presentation to where we are now is that the results of the wage study have been incorporated into the budget following your approval a few weeks ago. So those numbers all reflect that new study. A couple other things I just wanted to mention. The resolution itself is in the same format that we always have. It's very detailed. It's a pretty long resolution, but there's a lot of good information in there. I did get notified by our chief judge last week about some concerns about some of the language. If you look in the resolution, page 6 of the resolution, there's certain references that all judges, elected officials, department heads shall abide by certain policies. The chief judge informed me that they don't always have to abide by our policies, but they normally do. We work really well with them. He also informed me that they have an administrative order from the chief judge to adopt most of our policies as they're written. And so he questioned whether or not that language was necessary if we were to change future policies. Could be an issue there, but again, we haven't had any problem working with the courts on those policies. But something that I've emailed to the board and something I wanted to mention tonight. Again, we have opportunity for discussion and time to amend if there's a desire to do that later on. But just to summarize again, feel like this is a good budget, a strong budget. We're very blessed to be in the financial position that we're in. It's a conservative budget in terms of planning for some of the challenges that are currently being experienced, but we're still able to fund our necessary services and hopefully keep county government doing well. So I'll let Cindy if she has anything to add. Otherwise, we'll try to answer questions. Again, the hope tonight is if there's a consensus that something needs to change, that we receive that information so that we can prepare the final resolution accordingly. If there's a deep question on something buried in a departmental budget, we might have to circle back to you, but we'll do our best to answer whatever questions we can tonight. And we're certainly available over the next few weeks to get you any information that may be necessary between now and then. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. So really the intent in the discussion tonight is to flesh out any proposed changes or amendments so that they can get addressed, so that we can have the public posting period and the hearing and get the budget approved at the next full board meeting. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Commissioners? Commissioner Gross.
Nathan and Cindy, I noted that you just indicated that this budget includes the effects, the impact of the wage study, and that's great. I'm glad to hear that. But it also, it's indicated that it currently includes a 3% cost of living adjustment. Given that we are involved in contract negotiations with several unions, and it's quite possible that they might at some point settle for something more than 3%, and we know we have Me Too clauses. Do you envision that we might have to do budget amendments of some sort in January?
It's always possible. I can't speculate too much on how those negotiations will go. I will tell you that those negotiations sort of sync up with our budget process. And so a lot of the financial matters to be determined happen later on in the negotiating process. So those are really yet to be delved into. But yeah, we're in those negotiations now. Can't really say a whole lot about them, but there's always a possibility of having to amend the budget for that or for other things that may arise between now and the end of the year. But we feel pretty comfortable with the numbers that we've included here.
But so to answer my question, we would in fact have the potential of budget amendments in January for the effect of the cost of living.
Potentially, yeah.
And would that mean we would have to go back through the budget to try to find offsetting funds?
We would, if we need to amend the budget for a higher expense, we would have to go back through the budget. We can do that. It wouldn't be redoing the entire budget. It would be looking at the specific areas that are impacted, but yeah, it's a possibility if need be.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Helserman.
Comment, the 3% plus just applies to non-union, is that correct?
Mhm.
So
But-
then, the unions would likely try to at least match what the total, because it's more, for a lot of people, it's more than 3% with the wage study, I would suppose, so.
Yeah, the wage study was for non-union employees that we do that about once every 7 or 8 years, whereas the unions have comparable studies done every time we negotiate with them. And so the wage study was really to address the non-union wage scale and to make adjustments that are necessary to them. But again, I don't necessarily want to talk a lot about union negotiations tonight because they're in the early stages, but yeah, certainly you can imagine that they'll be watching what gets adopted in this budget as part of their discussion.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Helserman, I just want to make sure you're aware that the 3% is included for all employee groups, not just the non-union. So.
Yeah, it's budgeted for all in this budget. So I apologize.
I see. So then whatever wage study that they bring forward would be part of the back and forth then.
Yeah, if the board were to approve a higher than that for a certain union, then that's where we'd need to come in and make budgetary adjustments.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Commissioner Gross wants to chime in again, but we'll go around. Commissioner Zajac.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last week, I brought up the important project of adjusting the quarters at the prosecutor's office. There's a very small break room. And I know that my colleagues received an email from Judge Prosecutor Reeder that showed even if you wanted to bring up a picnic table, there wouldn't be enough space to walk by and go to the bathroom in the shared space. So I would like to rediscuss or bring up the importance of this project. I understand Judge Prosecutor Reeder has been making phone calls and hoping to garner additional support. So as a topic of discussion, I'd like to hear if any commissioners had any additional thoughts on this capital improvement project, which was discussed in our first board workshop I think we had a price tag of about $500,000 on it then, and the final CIP project came back at $200,000. We've proposed, as I understand from Administrator Byrd, about 950 or so thousand in the CIP. I know it's just over that, but it's
983.
983,000. So adding the 200,000 would put us below our budgeted project, CIP project expense of 1.2 million. And I know we have, Cindy, about $8 million in our capital.
And our capital fund balance?
Yes.
By the end of the year, it'll be 8 million. It's right around 7.5 right now. So we allocate on a monthly basis.
So if we spend 983,000, we'd have 7.1-ish million left over. Again, still enough to add this very important project. So I would just like any input my colleagues have on that issue. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Zajac. What I would propose doing is we'll, if we could get through these general discussion and then on your specific, if there's commissioners that want to chime in on that. Anybody, Commissioner Smith?
Sorry, just to clarify on the issue with the courts, you're gonna massage the language with the wherefores and the thereas and.
Yeah, so the language that's in the budget resolution has been in our budget resolution historically. It was something that was brought up this year as, the courts, of course, are an independent branch of government, so they don't always have to abide by our policies. And so I think there was some sensitivity about language saying you shall do this. And again, they do follow our policies. We work well with them, but there was some concern about could that language be complicating down the road. So I'd look for feedback from the board on that if that's, and again, we have time to connect with the chief judge between now and when the budget's voted on. It doesn't, not something that has to be decided tonight, but I did want to share with you, it was one concern that came up since last week.
All set. Any other commissioners haven't, Commissioner Drick?
On that topic, was there a proposed alternate language? Or
No,
was it supposed to just be taken out?
No, I think the idea is to not refer to the judges in that language because they're a separate branch of government. He does have, and I can share this with the board. He provided an administrative order from the chief judge adopting county policies, and so in effect, the policies were followed. I think it's more concern about, if policies were to change in the future, we're binding them to something that we may not have the ability to bind them to. And so I think it's just looking out for that concern, but I will email you what was shared with me so you can all see it and then we can discuss it further.
All set, Commissioner.
All set.
Anybody else who hasn't chimed in for the first time? I'm going to go ahead and chime in as the chair. I get last to go. I wanted to just share my thoughts on the changing of the language to adjust what the courts have said. I would want to check with legal counsel. This has been, the language has been in there for many budget cycles to understand, the full ramifications and would feel more comfortable having legal counsel take a look at it. The other thing too is, that I would, maybe broach with legal counsel is the issue of whether or not that would be considered boilerplate language, that if you accept this money, you also accept these conditions. That's my definition of boilerplate. I know that is, language put into budgets up in Lansing that, says to the legislative body says to the executive branch, you accept this money, we appropriate, but you also accept these terms and conditions. So I would want to understand the impact on that. So anyway, that's the only comments that I have regarding the budget.
I'll be happy to request a legal opinion that I can share with the board.
Commissioner Gross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a follow-up question to the one I had earlier. It seems to me the last time we had union negotiations, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't we determine that for every 1% increase in cost of living, for example, from 3 to 4%, that would cost us roughly $500,000? Is that still pretty close?
I believe it was $750,000. But you have to remember that not all of the employees are general funded employees.
Right.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Before we talk about what Commissioner Zajac had brought up regarding the office area, the lunch area for the prosecutor. So is any commissioners want to share their thoughts addressing what Commissioner Zajac had addressed? Commissioner Gross.
I agree with Commissioner Zajac's proposal, and if it sounds as though we can find a way to fund it. And so I would definitely be supportive of prosecutor's request to make that physical change.
Oh, go ahead.
Yep, Commissioner Plank.
When I first became commissioner, the first tour that I took was the prosecutor's office, and it was brought up then how crowded the space was, how they had outgrown that space, and I'm surprised that this didn't come up sooner. I would have expected it to expand that area so that the employees have a place to sit down and have lunch or just not be on top of each other. So I'm in total support. However best it is to fund it, I believe that we should be giving the prosecutor's office a much needed wing of some sort to for the employees to come to work every day and perform the duties that we expect them to. So I'm 100% on board.
Thank you. Commissioner Helserman.
Did I read correctly that he was going to give up an FTE to help in this regard? Did I read that correctly?
He did agree to give up an authorized FTE. That FTE was funded out of ARPA. So it was part of the 2022 budget resolution. And the position was actually never filled, but he did agree to unauthorize that position and take away the funding and put that funding back in ARPA.
Okay.
Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, just pointing out in our capital improvement plan for 23 through 28, in the allocation we have for next year, there's 30 some projects allocated here, 60 total, but facility renovations over 30 projects. The scope of this project is expected to be less than 250,000. We have a allocation of well over 1.2 million going into the CIP for 2023, of which we've only really allocated, I believe, less than $900,000 or thereabouts. And so I support adding that to the capital improvement plan as a means of funding it. And I think we owe it to our employees to always maintain maybe not the highest mahogany desk quality in the world, but a reasonable work environment.
Mahogany in the budget, so just to be clear, this would be a break room and a couple small offices.
Anybody else? Commissioner Reader.
I think it's over needed, especially the part regarding the victim witness program. It is very important for those people to have confidentiality, and there really isn't any right now. That program has been an establishment for a long time. Like when I was back there, we started it. And you do need to provide that to victims. And sometimes in the situation that they have now, it's not possible. That's more important to me than lunchroom, but they probably need a place to eat too. But I'm in support.
Thank you. Anybody else with comments? Commissioner Zajac.
I'd just like to thank my colleagues for good discussion on this topic. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Seeing no further discussion, or at least for the first round, I'm going to chime in and say I've chatted with Prosecutor Reader, and I'm supportive of what he wants to do. So, anybody else?
So do we give this back to the administrator to do the details?
Yeah,
And
What I would take away from this conversation is that there's a strong consensus to add this into the budget. So we would do that from this conversation, with the funding source being our capital fund. That's what we would take away from this conversation.
I'd say without objection, or I don't know.
Yeah, just based on the discussion, you clearly have a strong majority, if not, so. Yeah, it would make sense to put it into the budget and then offer the budget, when we, put it into the budget so that when we vote on it, next meeting, that's included in there, so.
It would be included for the public inspection as well.
So I just want to make sure you're all aware, it's not going to actually change anything in the budget. It's just going to be on the budget resolution because we don't budget for capital. We approve the projects.
Thank you. Any other last comments on this discussion item for the budget? Hearing none, we'll close out the discussion. Thank you very much. It was a very informative.
you all.
Appreciate it. Item number 12, we'll start with resolutions for consideration. We'll start off with resolution 2022-11-166. It's a resolution authorizing granting of an easement to Consumers Energy. Is there a motion?
Support, Plank.
Motion by Commissioner Griffith, support by Commissioner Plank. Who is speaking to this issue? Is it Kevin?
Director Eggleston here.
Go ahead.
Yes, good evening, commissioners. I presented this last meeting. As some of you know, Consumers they're starting to do electronically controlled valves in a lot of their gas junctions. There's a gas junction on the Lutz property. So they have requested an easement so that we can run some underground electrical utility to that gas nest. So any questions you might have, feel free.
Questions from commissioners? Director, I have one. Oh, did you? Oh, Commissioner Drick.
Thank you. I note that there's no consideration, no money coming to us for them to obtain this easement, and it appears to be lengthy in terms of years. Was there any discussion that they bill us when we use their gas and electricity? How come we don't get any money for the easement?
Yes, this was discussed. We were also looking into getting some electric to the Lutz Park, the parking lot there. This was discussed in the Parks and Open Space Committee. We were trying to do some bartering with them, although they declined. We did get a quote to get electric there. I had discussed this with Administrator Byrd as well, and we thought it was in the best interest to not pursue any form of payment.
I understand that. Would you also be okay with changing the easement from the current language that says if they decide to not use it or abandon it, they still keep it, and it could at least revert back to us if they decide to abandon the easement, get our attorneys involved to protect us?
Certainly, I would definitely support that.
Yeah, it's at the second paragraph, top of page 2, I believe.
Okay, can be taken a look at.
Take a look at it. Thank you, Kevin.
Certainly.
Any other discussion? Yeah, actually, Commissioner Drick had the same question that I had, so I'm not going to ask the same question over, but I would ask our director if we made a motion to postpone this until we get the language corrected. Does that put us in any time crunch issues?
Not that I'm aware of.
So I'd offer.
If this could be resolved, I'd be happy to bring another resolution forward to the next meeting.
Is there interest on my colleague's part to postpone this?
I move to postpone until this issue is resolved. Bring it back next 2 weeks if we can. I suppose we can.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion to amend by Commissioner Helserman with support by Commissioner Drick. Any discussion on the, that's not really a motion to amend, it's a motion to postpone, excuse me. Any discussion? All those in favor of postponing, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. So it's postponed to the next full board meeting.
Thank you, commissioners.
The next resolution, which requires a roll call vote. Thank you for adding that little notation in there. 2022-11-167. It's a resolution authorizing additional contribution for several employee divisions to MERS in fiscal year 2022. Is there a motion?
So move, Gross.
Support Plank.
Motion by Commissioner Gross, support by Commissioner Plank. This was discussed in committee, but if you want to give us a refresher.
Hello again. So this is requesting authorization to make an additional payment to MERS for our defined contribution unfunded liability. And also, in addition to that, completely fund several different divisions that we have available that are union. So it would be a $1 million unfunded $1 million payment to MERS to be put into the surplus division. So it is not going to any specific group. $250,000 of that would be coming from our general fund, and $750,000 of that would be coming from our benefit fund. And the money from our benefit fund, we did have $500,000 budgeted. Our healthcare expenditures are actually coming in lower than we anticipated, so we do have some extra money that we can move into this line item for this purpose. And in addition to that, we are requesting that we make some additional payments for the ambulance division for Fund 210. In the amount of $159,681. For the building inspection division, it's an old union division that we had for building that still have a couple of terminated vested employees in there in the amount of $9,540. And for the dispatch division, Fund 261, $44,565 for their non-union employees. So again, as we have spoke to the commissioners many times, we have been working very hard in funding our unfunded liability for pension. As you know, last year we went from 74% funded to 83% funded, which is great strides. But unfortunately, we still have a $34.2 million unfunded liability that we need to tackle. So I would appreciate your approval of this request.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions from commissioners? Commissioner Gross.
Cindy, one of the items for the 159,000 is described as the ambulance division. Is that what we commonly refer to as EMS?
Yes, it's for the paramedic union at EMS. Correct.
Thank you.
Anybody else? We do have a motion and support. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Gross,
Yes.
Commissioner Plank,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Reader,
Yes.
Commissioner Nakagiri,
Yes.
Commissioner Helserman,
Yes.
Commissioner Drick,
Yes.
Commissioner Zajac,
Yes.
and Commissioner Griffith.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next up is 2022-11-168. It's a resolution proclaiming November 2022 as Homeless Awareness Month. Is there a motion?
So moved, Reader.
Support.
Motion by Commissioner Reader, support by Commissioner Smith. That was discussed in committee. Is there any questions, comments from commissioners? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The resolution passes. Next up is 2022-11-169. It's a resolution authorizing the purchase of a new ambulance on an insurance claim. Is there a motion?
So move, Helserman.
Support Zajac.
Motion by Commissioner Helserman, support by Commissioner Zajac. This was fast tracked right to the Board of Commissioners, so I'll turn it over to our EMS Director, Dave Felposh.
Good evening, and thank you again for permission to fast track this resolution. Back on September 23rd, we had one of our ambulances was being towed. In the process of being towed, it caught on fire. That fire caused the ambulance and all of its contents to be a total loss. We've been working with MMRMA since on the whole replacement process, and late last week, earlier this week, they approved a demo ambulance that I was able to locate through the vendor that we normally use, much like the two demos you approved us to purchase earlier in the year. So this ambulance meets all of our specifications, something we can have back on the road very quickly, and it fits within the insurance claim. So obviously the dollar amount's a bit above that, what we can purchase without board approval. So I need your approval to purchase that truck.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner Gross.
I would just like to make a comment. I'd like to thank Director Felposh for getting on top of this. We know that there's long lead times and manufacturer delays in trying to get a lot of vehicles, particularly ambulances. And I'm really thankful for his due diligence in finding a replacement vehicle as quickly as possible. So thank you, Director Felposh.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? This also requires a roll call vote.
Commissioner Helserman,
Yes.
Commissioner Dreck,
Yes.
Commissioner Zajac,
Yes.
Commissioner Griffith,
Yes.
Commissioner Gross,
Yes.
Commissioner Plank,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Reader,
Yes.
and Commissioner Nakagiri.
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is 2022-11-170. It's a resolution to levy the 2022 allocation millage. Is there a motion?
Griffith.
Support Smith.
Motion by Commissioner Griffith, support by Commissioner Smith. We have our Director of Equalization, Sue Bostwick, with us.
Good evening. This is the veterans millage that was approved on the 8th. I've worked with or talked to the Director of Veterans, and he's decided what they wanted to levy to set their budget this next year. So this is the millage that he has brought forth.
Any questions from commissioners? Seeing none, this also requires a roll call.
Commissioner Griffith,
Yes.
Commissioner Gross,
Yes.
Commissioner Plank,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Reader,
Yes.
Commissioner Nakagiri,
Yes,
Commissioner Helserman,
Yes.
Commissioner Dreck,
Yes.
and Commissioner Zajac.
Yes.
Motion carries.
thank you. Next up is 2022-11-171. It's a resolution requesting a correction to the apportionment report. Is there a motion?
So moved, Griffith. Support Plank.
Motion by Commissioner Griffith, support by Commissioner Plank. Good thing you didn't go anywhere.
The apportionment report is basically what I report to the state. I asked for approval of that in October. Any changes in that through getting the tax bills done have to be corrected at the state level also. So any millage that's been voted in, we had 2 voted in. I had one that actually was voted in August, and it was tied up with the debt bonding agent. And it didn't come to me in a timely manner by September 30th. So now that's being put in there along with 4 different units that did not put in a special assessment district in their 591. So that's really what the corrections are.
Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? I had a lengthy conversation with Ms. Boswick on just so to understand the details and I appreciate the time you spent with me. But anybody else have questions or comments?
I'd just like to make it's kind of a related question. One of them is Fowlerville District Library. Libraries as well as schools and school libraries some of them are taking a turn. And they're putting things that are, if the general public knew what was in there, they would not approve. And so there's a new library board and the old director, the past director, her present director has given her resignation. So we're hoping that there'll be a new direction in that regard, but it's something that we as citizens just need to be aware of. If you turn on the light, the cockroaches flee. And we just need to turn on the light and help our community to be what a healthy community should be. So, and the library is an important part of that. Thank you. That's just my comment.
Thank you, Commissioner Helserman. Anybody else? This also requires a roll call.
Commissioner Griffith.
Yes.
Commissioner Gross.
Yes.
Commissioner Plank. Commissioner Smith.
Yes.
Commissioner Reader.
Yes.
Commissioner Nakagiri.
Yes.
Commissioner Helserman.
Yes.
Commissioner Dreck.
Yes.
And Commissioner Zajac.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The last resolution of the evening, 2022-11-172. It's a resolution authorizing the appointment of the public health officer. Is there a motion?
So moved, Reader.
Support blank.
Motion by Commissioner Reader, support by Commissioner Plank. This one has been talked about. I don't think it needs any introduction on what we're doing tonight. But I would ask if commissioners have comments that they want to share with their colleagues.
We are going to, I think that we're going to be able to nominate people's names and then follow the procedure we have if there's more than one nomination.
Correct. If we have I'd say more than one. If we have two nominations, then we would ask for a vote on candidate A or candidate B. If there's three or more, then we do the same thing, but then just take the top two and run off. So. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yeah, I just wanted, because after we pick the person, and then I guess we have to, the picking of the person is the ratifying of the resolution, I would suppose.
Yeah. So. Commissioner Gross.
In reading through the resolution in the third whereas and the third bullet point, it reads, the Personnel Committee determined which candidates met the qualifications described in the job description and interviewed 4 candidates on October 31st, 2022. Actually, there, in order to be accurate, it should read that the full Board of Commissioners interviewed the 4 candidates on October 31st. I'm wondering if that requires an amendment.
Yeah, I think that we need to just say that the Personnel Committee as a committee of the whole, because it was the Personnel Committee meeting, but it included everyone. So it was a Personnel Committee, but it was expanded, maybe it's expanded Personnel Committee.
I would offer this language for the amendment. So it says the Personnel Committee, and I would add in comma, acting as a committee of the whole, another comma, and then if that's captures the intent of your amendment, Commissioner Gross.
I think that would suffice, yes.
Support.
So we have the amendment by Commissioner Gross, support by Commissioner Zajac. Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We have an amended motion. Any other comments, questions, Commissioner Gross? Commissioner Zajac.
Mr. Chair, would you like us to open nominations before discussing any specific?
Yeah, that would be good. Yes.
Okay, with that, I'll motion to open nominations.
Support.
All those in favor of opening nominations signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Accepting nominations. Commissioner Plank.
I'd like to nominate Matt Bowling.
Are there any other nominations? Commissioner Helserman.
We will nominate Thomas Latchney.
Are there any other nominations?
Motion to close nominations.
Support.
Motion by Commissioner Zajac to close nominations, supported by Commissioner Helserman. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of closing nominations signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Nominations are closed. We have two candidates, so go ask my colleagues if anybody had comments on their either candidate. Seem like Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, I think we've nominated the two top people, personal opinion. Mr. Latchney, I keep on reviewing his resume over and over, and I am very impressed with Mr. Latchney. I think it would be great to have him back here. I think he represents the type of employee we want in Livingston County. That said, and it's through no fault of his own, but there's two key components in my mind that he needs to be cultivated in Thomas Latchney, which if we can find to get him in here in some sort of senior deputy role, I would be strongly in favor of, but based on the interview we had and his background, he has little or no budgeting experience, and the health department budget is a big number. And he has little or no management experience, which is another key factor, because he does have a staff of 30 to 50 people now. So for that reason, I would love to get Mr. Latchney in here. I just don't know that it ought to be at the director level.
Any other commissioners with comments, questions? Commissioner Zajac.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I very much enjoyed the interview process. We got to meet four very strong candidates. I share Commissioner Smith's assessment that these are the top two candidates. And I appreciate Commissioner Nakagiri, some of the work you've done to organize some of the data for us. It's been good to see that. And I also share the sentiments of Commissioner Smith that Mr. Latchney shares or has some very strong characteristics, some strong experience in the space that's important here. Interestingly, these two candidates are both environmental guys, which is interesting that's an important concern. I believe they both discussed in their resume for Livingston, or in their interview for Livingston County. And it's something that's very interesting that in light of certain current events in the water situation, it's important, I think, to have somebody with that level of skill set. as well. I think that both these candidates have different interesting experiences, some academic, some professional experiences, and that has been a great, I'll say, balancing act for me as I've weighed the situation and look forward to casting my vote here at the end of the discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anybody else? I'll go last. Yeah, I concur with my, the previous colleagues who have spoken. I do think we have the two best candidates here. And I appreciate Mr. Latchney's persistence in pointing out, his qualifications, because on my initial assessment, I didn't think he qualified based on what I was reading. So I appreciate his persistence. I acknowledge the a couple things. One is, I'll say the areas where he would need to be, Mr. Latchney would need to be shored up, mentioned by Commissioner Smith. But I also look at the strengths, and one of the biggest strengths is that he has a degree, a master's in public health, which is, a specified, I'll say, requirement / desire on the part of the state health department. Obviously there's alternatives to a master's in public health, but the first criteria in my mind, as I would characterize it, is that master's in public health. And I am somebody who got educated during this process because I kind of looked at master's in public health or somebody with a nursing degree or medical, background as being equivalent. But in the interview process, I've concluded that the optimum degree is a master's of public health, because the master's of public health is looking at improving the health of a population as a whole. A doctor or a nurse is looking at improving the patient, the health of a specific patient with a specific set of problems or health issues. So the ability to sift through peer-reviewed studies and understand the statistics behind it, to understand, whether or not that study was applicable to the conditions here in Livingston County, I see as a great value. In the past, we've had health officers that have not had the Masters of Public Health. They've had a degree in public administration. And I see that as it makes it difficult for the health officer to, I'll say, critically assess and push back when needed against, I'll say, wrong information, misinformation, whether it's from the CDC or the state health department. I am strongly desirous of somebody that has that technical ability. And I think, my concerns, they certainly apply to the last pandemic, looking back, reflecting on how we did things. What could we do better? What could we do differently? And I think having that expertise would have been a big plus. And I think looking forward, some may say, well, we don't, that pandemic was a once in a lifetime thing. And I tend not to agree with that. Just recently, President Biden extended the COVID emergency for a number of months. And I just don't trust big government to necessarily look out for our rights. I mean, the track record is that they're not going to look out for our rights. And we need somebody that has the ability to push back. I have a couple of items that I'll mention, and then I'll relinquish the floor. Currently in the health department, when somebody comes in for a flu shot, we require a mask. And that's something that I don't agree with that policy. In past years, when we had flu shots distributed by the county health department, I am not aware that masks were required in the past. And the mask is a recommendation, is guidance from the CDC, but I think that's guidance that is ought to have been pushed back against. It is guidance that yeah, I'll just repeat myself, that it should have been pushed back against. The other, my last comment is actually informative from Gina Gagne from Genoa Township. I was unaware that we've actually been emailing persons, recommending the mRNA shot for kids. I just think that's wrong. I mean, everything that I've read about the effects of COVID on kids, we're 99.9997, I think, percent of kids are fine. I just think that's while the CDC has added that to its recommended battery of vaccines for children, my independent reading says that that's not good, and I don't know, I can't say with certainty that Mr. Latchney would have followed the advice of the CDC on vaccinating of children, but I do know that Mr. Bowling has, and that is a troubling factor to me. And so anyway, I'm done rambling. I'll relinquish the floor and ask if there's any other comments from commissioners. Anybody that hasn't spoken yet? Oh, do you? Okay, Commissioner Hauserman.
This is probably, I think, one of the most important decisions that I will have made in my 6 years as commissioner because of the power inherent in this position. I think that, if I could see 10 years down the road, I would know how to vote tonight. I don't. I agree with Commissioner Nakagiri that with the makeup of the government as we have in Michigan after the election and the makeup of the government in Washington, that it's very likely that COVID will have a resurrection from the dead. And it is dead, but it'll have a resurrection from the dead, or something else in like manner will be there. I think that it is a local decision, and I will vote for the person that I think will have the most strength to make the local decision. And I think that is to be Tom Latchney. That's kind of where I am. I like Matt. We've had a lot of nice conversations, and he knows us and we know him. And I will support whichever of these people are selected.
Anybody else? Anybody? I'm going to go a second time since everybody's gone once and nobody needs indicating they want to speak a second time. No, I want to address I'll say the areas that Mr. Latchney would need shoring up in the administration end of things. And I think we have a strong team in the health department that has the administrative experience, managerial experience that is there to assist Mr. Latchney when if he were to get the nod and get integrated into Livingston County. I mean, the county does have great employees. I've seen that firsthand. We have a great team, and I've got high confidence that when Mr. Latchney has a question in the administration area, that he'll get the support. What we don't have what we have a great, in my view, strength in the administrative side. We do not have, as a county employee, anybody with a master's of public health. We haven't had a person in the health officer position. The previous officer didn't have that. I'm not sure the one prior to that, but no, with my understanding of, the value of public health degree, I think I want somebody in Livingston County that works for Livingston County that could seek the advice and counsel of our medical director, who happens to be, Dr. Marquez, and he's a fine guy. I've chatted with him, but he may not have the same perspective that the citizens in Livingston County have, given that was initially hired by Washtenaw County. I mean, there's a vast difference between how citizens viewed the pandemic in Washtenaw versus Livingston. And I'm desirous of somebody that would, have the ability to critically assess, not just the CDC, but critically assess, our own medical director, and be able to sift through the reams of data and the analysis and make what I'm going to call their own independent decision. And it doesn't mean that, that person's going to be right, has to agree with me. What I want is somebody that can do it independently and can defend what they did, as opposed to saying, well, it was just following orders. So that's a strong desire of mine, and I'll give up the floor again, ask if there's any final comments. Commissioner Smith.
Just one final comment, and that is to reiterate Commissioner Ellsworth's point about we do have two good candidates. Whichever one wins the favor of this vote should know that whatever our discussions have been, that you will have the full support of the board and given every opportunity to succeed, and would wish you well.
Thank you. One last call for comments before we take a roll call and people express their preference. Okay.
Commissioner Reader. Mr. Bowling. Commissioner Nakagiri.
Mr. Latchney.
Commissioner Helserman.
Mr. Latchney.
Commissioner Dreck.
Mr. Latchney.
Commissioner Zajac.
Mr. Bowling.
Commissioner Griffith.
Mr. Bowling.
Commissioner Gross.
Mr. Bowling.
Commissioner Plank.
Mr. Bowling.
And Commissioner Smith.
Mr. Bowling.
Mr. Chair, we have 6 votes for Mr. Bowling and 3 for Mr. Latchney.
Congratulations, Mr. Bowling. Let's see, we're done with the resolutions. We have to pay some bills. Looking for a motion to pay claims dated November 14th, 2022, and payables dated October 15th through November 4th of 2022.
So move, Gross.
Support.
Motion by Commissioner Gross, support by Commissioner Griffith. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are at the second call to the public. This one is 2 minutes in duration. If you wish to address the board.
I do have one card, Kelly Uphouse from Brighton Township.
Hello, board. Thank you for listening to me tonight. As the majority of you obviously haven't been listening to your constituency, I've been elected delegate for my area in Brighton. I plan to push back against any edicts that do not actually follow medical directives, like we have seen over the last 2 years. And this is the only thing I really want to say, just so we're clear. Trace amounts of CO2 in the atmosphere is catastrophic for the planet and an existential risk to our survival, according to the environmentalists. But directly breathing in concentrated CO2 under a mask all day is considered healthy. That's what they considered healthy for our children for 2 school years. They forced them on buses to comply with monetary gains. Shame on all of you. Shame on you. This is your way out and this is your legacy. Congratulations.
Janine Ayer, Genoa Township.
I again want to thank you all for this process. I thought it was valuable. I learned a lot from basically witnessing these candidates being interviewed. I do want to comment that there were some commissioners that had a foregone conclusion before they even heard the other 3. In fact, one commissioner, when Mr. Bowling was questioning his employment security, this commissioner said, as long as I'm on the board, you have no problem, before even this commissioner heard any other candidates. And I feel like he spoke the quiet part out loud. I feel like some of you had the same attitude, that you really didn't give these other candidates a fair shake. You already had decided on Matt Bowling, and I don't think that was judging fairly. So I just wanted to make that observation public. Thank you.
I don't have any further cards.
So we'll go to Zoom and we'll start out with Stacy Farrell. Stacy, if you state your full name and your township, you'll have 2 minutes.
Stacy Farrell, Osceola Township. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I appreciate the resolution regarding homeless awareness, and I do believe making a countywide declaration in support of our most struggling residents is an important way to encourage citizen support. And if you recall, I came to this board in the spring regarding a mental health resolution that was ignored. And if we were to take a look at the contributing factors that lead to homelessness, one of them is mental health disorders. And some reports show that as much as 30% of the chronically homeless have mental health conditions, and about 50% have co-occurring substance abuse problems. Now, upon questioning the status of the consideration of this with Commissioner Helserman just a few weeks ago, he indicated to me that the board did not issue advocacy resolutions and that he thought they had little impact. So I am so pleased to see this body reconsider the importance of encouraging citizen support for all of our neighbors in whatever challenge that they may be experiencing. The resolution I proposed, which was drafted by a team of health and government professionals, highlights 14 points, but I can talk about like 4 of them just now. Whereas mental health conditions are real, common, and treatable, and people experiencing mental health challenges deserve support, compassion, and care, mental health is no less important than physical health. Whereas the average age of early signs of mental illness is 14 when most students enter high school. Whereas the World Health Department has found that neighborhood safety, access to green space, healthy food, housing, healthcare, and pollution can shape the mental health of people. Whereas the Surgeon General's Advisory on Mental Health identified youth with intellectual and developmental disabilities, racial and ethnic minorities, LGBTQ folks, low-income folks.
You have
rural
15
living.
seconds.
Oh, shoot. Anyway, obviously there is a connection between mental health and homelessness. And I'm glad that you're taking the positive step forward towards the awareness of the in-house. And I look forward to revisiting the mental health resolution that helps connect the dots between mental health and homelessness and other factors affecting our neighbors that prevent them from reaching their highest potential. And congratulations to Matt Bowling on his appointment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up will be Scott Richardson. Mr. Richardson, if you state your full name and township or city, you'll have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Scott Richardson. I am in Marion Township, but I'm here tonight representing the local Homeless Continuum of Care Committee. And I just want to thank the Board of Commissioners for their support in recognizing November as Homeless Awareness Month and showing support to all of the agencies that work on a daily basis to address those needs. So thank you for your support.
Thank you. Next up will be Lisa Rozmanovich. Did I do it right?
You did. Congratulations. I just wanted to say that I am very disappointed in the decision tonight that you made with the health director. And all I can say is that we will not comply with anything that happened in 2020. So you can expect a lot of pushback. Have a great night.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else on Zoom. So I'll close the call to public and look for a motion to adjourn.
So move, Helserman.
Excuse me. Point of order, don't we have payables? tonight? We have payables tonight?
We did.
Payables, okay. Thank you.
Support.
Motion by Commissioner Helserman, support by Commissioner Zajac. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye opposed. We're adjourned.